We're heading in now.
In they went, cameras rolling, with the two leaders inside waiting for cameras to settle and the question they both knew was coming on an issue that could derail the Donald Trump presidency. To Ukraine's president, did Trump, in a phone call in July, pressure him to find dirt on Trump rival Joe Biden?
We had, I think, good phone call. It was normal.
The two spoke about many things, he said. Then,
so I think, and you read it, that nobody pushed me. Yes.
In other words, no pressure.
This as Democrats dissected a summary of that phone call released today by the White House. In it, Volodymyr Zelensky mentions to Trump the benefit of U.S. military aid. Trump then says, "I'd like you to do us a favor," and soon enough mentions Biden's son, who had financial interests in a Ukrainian company that Trump then urges Zelensky to investigate. In the summary, Trump raises it multiple times. He doesn't explicitly link U.S. aid to an investigation, but, say Democrats, it's absolutely the implication.
What those notes reflect is a classic mafia-like shakedown of a foreign leader.
That Trump may have used the power of the presidency to pressure Ukraine for his own political gain is a key reason Democrats yesterday launched an impeachment inquiry. And there's more. Behind closed doors tonight on Capitol Hill, lawmakers read through the whistleblower report behind all of it, said to be about several conversations between the two leaders, deemed urgent when it was privately put forward. Democrats who saw it tonight say it's damning.
I found the allegations deeply disturbing. I also found them very credible.
For his part, at the end of his trip to New York, Trump framed it as he does.
It's a joke. Impeachment for that?
Okay, so Paul, even with all of that, apparently there was yet another development today about precisely what it is we might learn tomorrow, right?
Indeed, and it's all about that whistleblower's report. Tonight, we're hearing it characterized, but the guts of it are still secret. Tomorrow, the acting director of national intelligence, the whistleblower's boss, is set to testify on Capitol Hill. He is a Trump appointee, but today a report that he threatened to quit if he's muzzled by the White House tomorrow. The suggestion being he wants to speak candidly and will do so no matter the consequences. The story was quickly denied by all sides today, but everyone's now wondering, what does he want to say? How far will he go? Tonight, it's got heads in this city spinning. Adrian.
All right, tomorrow then, Paul Hunter in Washington.
Do you think the president puts personal politics in international affairs here? Or, as the president mentioned, is this really just an innocent phone conversation?
Well, let's be careful calling it a transcript. This is clearly an edited document that the president's administration has put forward. As to whether there are questions here, I would simply look at numerous Republican senators who said that, quote, it's problematic, or, quote, there is definitely there. And these kind of things coming from Republican senators are a pretty good signal that there are at least questions involving the transcript.
All right, so President Trump saying, you know, all this is a joke, it's a witch hunt. He says Democrats, they can't beat him in an election, so they're just saying, let's just impeach him. So do you think this phone call is really grounds for an impeachment?
Well, impeachment, is important to note, is a political process and not a legal one. The definition of what is an impeachable offense is whatever a majority of the House of Representatives says that it is. That's been true for every administration. Now, is this particularly an impeachable offense? I think it will go through the House of Representatives and he will be indicted. I would also say that I'm almost certain that the senators in the Republican senators will not allow him to be convicted on these charges.
Dr. Curry, by simply having this inquiry into impeachment, is this playing into the Republicans' hands? Do you think this could go negative for Democrats in 2020?
Well, if we look back at what happened under Bill Clinton in 1998 and 1999, it definitely did not play out well for the Republicans who attempted to push impeachment during that time. The questions regarding this impeachable offense are a little bit different and I think more significant on the international scale. And I'm not entirely certain that they'll play out to be negative for the Democratic Party, but I do certainly think it will be a keystone of the debate going forward between both Democrats and Republicans during the presidential cycle.
All right, Dr. Curry with UTEP, political science professor, thank you so much for joining us today.
And I just told you about senators that threatened him with votes and no money coming into Ukraine if they do things. That's really what people are trying to say that I did, but the only difference is I didn't do it. You take a look at that call. It was perfect.
President Trump speaking right now about the House's impeachment inquiry into his phone call with Ukraine's president. Today, the White House released a memorandum of the call. In it, President Trump is described as asking Ukraine's president for a favor. He goes on to say he heard a Ukrainian prosecutor who was very good was shut down, and he says there is talk, former Vice President Joe Biden stopped that prosecution. Now, it is important to note a memorandum is not a verbatim transcript of exactly what transpired. Instead, it is based on the notes and the recollections of the Situation Room duty officers and the National Security Council staff assigned to listen in on the conversation. Even the White House admits there are a variety of factors that impact its accuracy, including accents and interpretation as well. During the call, Ukraine's president spoke through a translator. Now, while you've likely heard this phone call is at the center of the impeachment inquiry, you may not know the full backstory behind it and why the president was talking to Ukraine's president about Joe Biden and his son.
Jennifer Bellamy explains what the controversy is all about and why no action has been taken against the Bidens. Jennifer?
Well, as calls for President Trump's impeachment grew among House lawmakers, the president himself increased his own calls for an investigation into Democratic presidential frontrunner Joe Biden and his son. It's another layer to this situation, so we're breaking it down for you this evening. Phone call in question. President Trump admits he discussed Joe Biden with the president of Ukraine during a July phone call that's now led to a House impeachment inquiry. Trump has alleged former Vice President Biden used his influence as VP to help his son Hunter Biden's private sector work in Ukraine. Here's what we know. During his time as vice president, Joe Biden did lead the U.S. diplomatic efforts to help support Ukraine's new democracy and end corruption, even warning Russia to stop interfering there. Around that same time in 2014, Hunter Biden was hired by Burisma Holdings, a Ukrainian gas company, as a board member, reportedly making $50,000 a month. Earlier this year, he stopped working with the company, which had ties to the country's ousted former president. At the time, the Obama White House said Hunter Biden was a private citizen and there was no conflict of interest. But both Trump and his personal attorney, Rudy Giuliani, have claimed Joe Biden used the possibility of money from the U.S. to pressure the Ukrainian government to fire its top prosecutor, who was allegedly investigating Hunter Biden and his former company. Despite those claims from the president, there's been no evidence of any wrongdoing by either Biden, according to two former Ukrainian prosecutors general. Now, in its impeachment inquiry, the U.S. House looks to see if Trump himself withheld money from the Ukraine, $400 million in security and military aid, in an effort to pressure the country to investigate his political rival. Joe Biden says he never has spoken to his son about his overseas business dealings, and Trump is stirring this up because he knows Biden would beat him in a presidential election. Trump has said he's done nothing wrong and withheld money from Ukraine because other countries weren't putting in their fair share. But according to the European Union, it put up more than $16 billion in financial aid, along with billions from another organization as well.
So just how common is an impeachment or removal from office? Adam Bennett breaks down the numbers.
Is moving forward with an official impeachment inquiry.
Speaker Nancy Pelosi's words Tuesday marked just the fourth time in U.S. history the House of Representatives has launched an impeachment inquiry into a sitting president. Andrew Johnson was the first in 1868. The other three have happened in just the last 45 years. Richard Nixon in 1974, Bill Clinton in 1998, and in 2019, President Donald Trump.
It was a perfect call. There was no quid pro quo.
The House has only ever charged two presidents, Johnson and Clinton, with articles of impeachment. Nixon resigned before the House could charge him, and the Senate acquitted both Johnson and Clinton. Bottom line, no presidents have ever been removed from office after being impeached. This time around, more than 2/3 of House Democrats say they are open to impeachment of President Trump, and the Democratic majority House only needs a simple majority vote. For actual conviction and removal from office, 2/3 of the Republican-controlled Senate must vote for it. A much tougher battle. Adam Bennett, KHOU.
Exactly 2 months after a half-an-hour phone call between U.S. President Donald Trump and Ukraine's President Volodymyr Zelensky, the White House releasing a summary on Wednesday of their conversation. A call that's at the center of the formal impeachment inquiry into Trump launched Tuesday by top elected Democrat House Speaker Nancy Pelosi.
The president must be held accountable. No one is above the law.
So what was said in that phone call? According to the summary, Trump said to Zelensky, "I would like you to do us a favor." Trump asked the Ukrainian leader to look into the son of the frontrunner for the Democratic presidential nomination, Joe Biden.
Wait a second.
Democrats are accusing Trump of asking for Ukraine's help to smear Biden ahead of the 2020 election. In the call and in public, Trump has repeatedly suggested wrongdoing by Biden and his son without offering any evidence to back up the claims. According to the White House account of the call, Trump, referring to an allegation of corruption, said there's a lot of talk about Biden's son, that Biden stopped the prosecution, and a lot of people want to find out about that. So whatever you can do with the Attorney General would be great. If you can look into it, it sounds horrible to me. In the call, Trump repeatedly mentions involving the U.S. Attorney General William Barr and his own personal lawyer, Rudy Giuliani, like in this line, saying, "I will have Mr. Giuliani give you a call, and I am also going to have Attorney General Barr call, and we will get to the bottom of it. I'm sure you will figure it out." The Department of Justice said on Wednesday that Trump had not spoken with Barr about having Ukraine look into the Bidens.
It's the single greatest witch hunt in American history.
Trump calling the impeachment inquiry disgraceful Wednesday and defending his call with Ukraine's president.
There was no pressure. The way you had that built up, that call, it was going to be the call from hell. It turned out to be a nothing call. And whatever we can do.
Later in the day, Trump and Zelensky appearing side by side in New York on the sidelines of the UN General Assembly, both denying there was anything improper about their call.
It was normal. We spoke about many things, and you read it that nobody pushed me. Yes.
In other words, no pressure.
Days before their July call, Trump froze nearly $400 million in aid to Ukraine. The U.S. president denies that any request for help was tied to the funding freeze. Their phone call is just one part of a whistleblower's complaint over Trump's activities. The Trump administration blocked Congress from getting details about what the whistleblower had to say, citing presidential privilege. Then a late-day twist in this fast-moving story. The acting director of national intelligence was set to release the whistleblower complaint to Congress around the same time Trump was scheduled to hold a news conference in New York.
I've spoken with Leader Kevin McCarthy and the Republicans, many of them, and we were going to do this anyway, but I've informed them, all of the House members, that I fully support transparency on the so-called whistleblower information.
And more details are expected Thursday on the whistleblower complaint when the acting director of national intelligence is set to testify publicly before the House Intelligence Committee.
This was the first time the American and Ukrainian presidents have met in person. Their meeting on the sidelines of the United Nations planned well before Tuesday's announcement by House Democrats that they'll begin formal impeachment proceedings against Donald Trump. That decision triggered in part by a phone call Trump had back in July with his Ukrainian counterpart Volodymyr Zelensky. On Wednesday, the White House released a partial transcript of that call. In it, Trump asked Zelensky for, quote, a favor to investigate former U.S. Vice President Joe Biden's son, who had served on the board of a Ukrainian energy company. Joe Biden is running for president against Trump. Trump admits he made the request, but denies it was connected to Washington's pending defense aid package for Kiev. Still, it seems whatever was said during that phone call was enough to prompt an intelligence whistleblower to ring the alarm over the summer. That complaint finally delivered to lawmakers on Wednesday.
I fully support transparency on the so-called whistleblower information, even though it was supposedly secondhand information, but also insist on transparency from Joe Biden and his son Hunter. Additionally, I demand transparency from Democrats who went to Ukraine and attempted to force the new president, who I met and is an outstanding person who just met. They threatened him if he didn't do things.
House Democrats say their actions were lawful. Trump's, they insist, weren't.
That a president of the United States would interfere with our national security, would interfere with the national security of our ally, and do so for the illicit purpose of trying to advance his election campaign, having already sought foreign help in his first presidential campaign, would now abuse the power of his office yet again, this time to seek the help of another nation in his presidential campaign, is the most fundamental betrayal of his oath of office.
This is a political proceeding. Therefore, there's no threshold for anybody to meet in terms of a legal standard. The president doesn't really have to come up with any proof that he did something or didn't do something, and the Democrats really don't have to have any proof that says beyond a reasonable doubt the president did what he did. All they have to do is convince the American people, right? And that's the big point here.
But that could be an uphill battle. Before this week's announcement, poll after poll showed the majority of Americans oppose impeaching the president. Even the Democratic House Speaker, Nancy Pelosi, had said she had preferred to defeat Trump at the ballot box. Well, clearly she changed her mind, and Democrats are betting the American people will as well. Rudy Giuliani, CGTN in Washington.
Candidate at the center of the White House controversy is calling it a tragedy.
Joe Biden's in town to raise a little more campaign cash and to do a little television.
And CBS 2's Randy Page is live in Hollywood with more of what Biden had to say. Randy.
Well, Pat, Jeff, of all the news days to have the vice president in town, boy, this is one we would love to throw some questions his way. However, his campaign is not making any availability for us. We are at the gate of Jimmy Kimmel. The vice president is expected to arrive shortly, and we did get a glimpse of him this morning. As former Vice President Joe Biden was leaving a Manhattan Beach fundraiser today, he reacted to the call summary between President Trump and the Ukrainian president by saying the transcript is very interesting. He also released a written statement. It is a tragedy for this country that our president put personal politics above his sacred oath, former Vice President Joe Biden said in this statement released by his campaign. He went on to say, it's an affront to every single American and founding values of our country. Congress must pursue the facts and quickly take prompt action to hold Donald Trump accountable.
The notes of the call reflect a conversation far more damning than I or many others had imagined.
In Washington today, Burbank Congressman Adam Schiff, who is chair of the House Intelligence Committee, appeared to draw on his experience as a former Harvard-educated federal prosecutor with this observation.
There was only one message that president of Ukraine got from that call, and that was, this is what I need. I know what you need. Like any mafia boss, the president didn't need to say, that's a nice country you have. It'd be a shame if something happened to it, because that was clear from the conversation.
Today, Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky was sitting next to President Trump when he was asked about the phone call.
Nobody push it.
It's very clear from that conversation that the Ukrainian president is trying to do everything possible, flattery and anything else, to get Donald Trump on his side.
We spoke by satellite with San Fernando Valley Congressman Brad Sherman, who is a senior member of the House Foreign Affairs Committee.
Do you see this as having national security implications? That is, if the president has these kinds of relationships with foreign leaders, does it make him and this country a target?
Absolutely. Every foreign leader in the world that wants America to do something is trying to figure out how can he give money to the Trump empire, have his spend $1 million at some facility that's a Trump hotel.
You know, it's not unusual for the vice president to be happy to stop by and talk to us when he's here in Southern California. So far, we haven't seen him here, but we will keep our eyes peeled and give it a try. Live in Hollywood, Randy Page, CBS 2 News.
Cookout, the 18-ounce fire-grilled outlaw ribeye, Longhorn's new mixed grill, and our full-rack baby back ribs with Steakhouse mac and cheese. That's how steak is done. Longhorn Steakhouse. You can't fake steak.
I want to know how much involvement President Trump and his administration has had with other foreign countries.
What in the world is he doing, and why aren't the Republicans anxious to know? Why are they not willing to investigate?
I think it's imperative we get to the bottom of what was going on with Hunter Biden Jr.
And those are just some of the questions many of you are asking tonight. Did President Trump do anything wrong? And what does it mean to launch an impeachment inquiry? To get some straight answers, I turned to local college law professor, one of the ones best known around here, Paul Berman of George Washington University Law School. Has the president done anything wrong?
The president has almost certainly violated both his executive powers under Article 2 of the Constitution and he may also have violated campaign finance or even bribery laws.
What is an impeachment inquiry anyway?
So an inquiry is just that. It's an investigation that the House is undergoing. It is not itself an impeachment proceeding, and in fact, the House would have to vote to pursue an impeachment proceeding, and they have not done that yet. This, at this point, is an inquiry to see whether an impeachment proceeding is appropriate, and then if the House actually proceeds to articles of impeachment, then the actual trial would happen in the Senate.
What was your biggest takeaway from the launch of the inquiry?
This is really extraordinary. This is the first time in our history that we have a president who is conducting foreign policy, talking to a foreign dignitary, and the only topic was how that foreign dignitary could help his own election campaign. And so to do that is just such an extraordinary degree of wrongdoing and abuse of power. And the fact that Trump thinks that this particular transcript would somehow help him suggests that he really has no idea that what he's done is wrong.
First thing that must be made clear is that impeachment does not mean the removal from office. There's actually a long process from when a US president is impeached before he's possibly forced from office. And so far, Congress has never successfully removed a sitting president. The term impeachment refers to the filing of charges. To do that, the House of Representatives first begins an impeachment inquiry. House Speaker Nancy Pelosi launched this process Tuesday, and already 6 committees are investigating, as seen here, misconduct by US President Donald Trump. If they find enough evidence, they will then put forth what are called articles of impeachment. The House of Representatives then votes on these articles. All that's needed is a simple majority, and in a Democrat-controlled House, an impeachment seems possible. Next, it's up to the Senate to hold a trial on whether to remove the president. But this vote requires 2/3 of the Senate, a tall order because Republicans are in control. It would take what many analysts consider a bipartisan miracle to vote Trump out of office. Some history now, only 2 US presidents have ever been impeached: Andrew Johnson in 1868 and Bill Clinton in 1998. But both were acquitted and completed their terms. Richard Nixon here resigned in 1974 to avoid the prospect of impeachment. Of course, there are other issues at play. The Constitution allows for Congress to remove presidents if it's deemed they committed, quote, treason, bribery, or other high crimes and misdemeanors. Essentially, it boils down to an abuse of power. But because there are no precise standards of what constitutes as a high crime or misdemeanor, it opens the door to a lengthy, laborious process. Gerald Tan, CGTN, Washington.